Hi, I'm Rob from Woodward Culture. How do you imagine winter to be in Chile, or more specifically, Santiago, Chile? Santiago is the capital of Chile, if you didn't know. Do you imagine blue skies like here, with snow-topped mountains? Well, the reality, winter in Santiago can be summed up in one word. Cold grey smog. Okay, maybe it's not one word, but you get the drift. Cold grey smog. So, yes, this is a real photo I took of Santiago, more specifically. This behind me, you got the Escuela Militar, which is the military school, which is in Las Condes, Santiago. And with that there, that's not like a fog or a mist, it is smog. And before I went to Chile, I was told that Santiago was next to some mountains that are over 5,000 meters high. That's over like 13,000 feet if you're from the States. But unfortunately, since I arrived in winter, I didn't see any mountains for the first 2 weeks. And I started to think, yeah, they'd lied to me. Because Santiago always seemed to be cloudy or slightly foggy, I thought, but with a grayish browny color that and I couldn't really see the Andes Mountains because of this dense smog, especially when I was like living or staying in the center of the city. But after 2 weeks of not finding these, how can you miss 5,000 meter mountains? You can't just like, oh, they're not there anymore. No, that's how thick the smog was. And especially back then, this is like 94 and 95, that's last century, 94, 95. There was even more smog back then. You still get it now, but back then it was like horrendous. But one morning, after a night of rain, I walked out onto the street and I was dazzled by this bright white sheen from the snow on huge, imposing mountains. You know, the ones that they call the Andes? And that was until midday, where the smog started coming back and blurred that spectacular view again, unfortunately. Ended up being like this again. So, yes, there is a serious smog problem in Santiago every winter, and it can get so bad that on some days kids aren't allowed to leave their rooms. No, okay, you can use that as an excuse. You can't leave your room because there's smog. No, kids aren't allowed to do physical activity or sport at school due to the air pollution. And there are often public announcements on TV too, where people are recommended not to go outside and do physical activity. So please, no running away from the cops on those days, okay? So sometimes I remember you'd walking down the street, you could feel the smog in your eyes. And it's just disgusting. And the worst part, like when you wash your hair, you have to wash your hair just about every day, because you notice when you're washing it, I've got long hair, by the way, and you squeeze the hair and just this brown yuck goes in of the water. You can see it going down the drain, and that is from the smog. And you'll be surprised and disgusted the first few times, and then you just get used to it. But if you think if that's in your hair, imagine what goes into your lungs. But to try and combat the smog situation, there have always been restrictions of car use in Santiago. From Monday to Friday between, I think it was like 7:30 in the morning until 9 o'clock at night. Whereas how do you know which cars are banned from the roads on those days? Well, it depends on your license plate number. For example, on Monday, it might be the cars which have a license plate ending in, I don't know, 2 or 3. And Tuesday to be those ending in 4 and 5. And those cars, they cannot be on the streets. Otherwise, the cops will give you like a fine or something like that. And that's between like early 7:30 in the morning until 9 at night, because those are the like peak times. So either go to work really early, and then you have to leave really late after 9 anyway. So you got to figure out. It's like to promote people to use more public transport, like the metro, which is the subway, or the buses. And these changes, like what day your car was not able to be used, it depends from 1 month to the next. So next month, you might have on Mondays you can't drive your car, and then the next month it might be on Tuesdays, whatever. Okay? So it appears in newspapers, on TV, social media, and you can also know in advance on the, I think it was like Chilean Ministry of Transport website. And on days, I still got smog. I'm still affected after living in Chile for Santiago for 20 years. It's like, yeah, it's there. So on days where there is more of a serious smog problem or air pollution problem, there might be days where instead of just having 2 digits, or 2 cars, or what do you call them? Like, 2 digits on one day. So like, what's that? 20% of the cars off the streets. Sometimes they might add another 2 or 4 digits. So today there's a restriction for all cars that which have a license plate ending in 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and they're all off the street. And yes, that does happen quite often. And the thing is, it's up to you to know whether your car has this restriction or not. And if there are additional exceptions, it'll be on the 9 o'clock news the night before, and it's all in the newspapers and everything. So there's no excuse. You got to know these things if you're living in Santiago or driving in Santiago. And yes, this is traffic. This is on the how do we do this one? This bridge here, that's the bridge which is Apoquindo, and the long one going up. How do I do this? Anyway, going along here, over there, that's the Vespucio, Avenida Vespucio, which is like a ring that goes around the whole city. And this is like one of the very busy intersections. And yep, you can tell why they want some of the cars off the street, because there's a lot of pollution. So sometimes I remember people asking, does it get cold in Santiago? Well, it does get chilly. I know, terrible. It does get chilly in winter in Santiago, but nothing a coat won't fix. It's like not in the northern hemisphere where you got ice. Open the door and it's like packed with snow and ice and things like that. In Chile, no. So it does get cold or chilly there, but probably not what you're used to. In the morning before the sun comes up, it may float like in the heart of winter, like 0 degrees Celsius. Was that 32 degrees Fahrenheit, something like that? And when the temperature goes into the minuses, like it's -1 degrees today, it usually gets mentioned in the newspapers, and then you get all of those morning shows out on the street saying, oh, it's cold this morning, but in Spanish, of course. The afternoons in winter generally hover around 10 degrees maybe, a little less, a little more, depends on the day, and that's like 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Unless there's like a cold blast coming up from Antarctica. And those, they get a bit cooler. Another question is, does it snow in Santiago? Well, it does snow in Santiago, but I lived in the capital city for around 20 years, and it snowed 2, maybe 3 times in 20 years. And by snow, I usually mean like a light dusting of white, not enough to break out the skis and thermal boots and go down the street. No. I mean, once was around 9 p.m. on a very cold night, which is funny because we'd just come back from the airport after being in a much warmer Antofagasta. Antofagasta is in the north of Chile, and it's a lot warmer there. And we wondered, what's that funny sticky rain on the windscreen, and then it was snow. Another time was like for about a quarter of an hour, one afternoon, and this is where these photos are from. And it was, and then another time I think it snowed at night. Yeah, this is close to our institute, a language school that we had. So we just went out there and took photos of the cars. And this is like over 15 minutes. It just snowed heavily. It's like, oh, this is so exciting. It happened during the day, so you've got to go out and get photos. You can see these cars were surprised. Okay, cars don't get surprised. People are surprised, but the car had snow on it. You got the local bus, which is going in the direction of, you can't tell because it's covered in snow. But it's the 406 bus, so if you know where it goes. Okay? So basically, it doesn't snow very much, or it rarely, I should say, snows in Santiago in winter. In winter, unless it's like a freak event. And then, if it does snow, you'll hear about it like all day and the next day and everything like that. On the news, on those morning shows and everything like that. Just for the rest of the day, it's like, oh my God, it snowed today. Okay? So Santiago is a great place to be in winter. Okay, here's another shot. This is a police car in one of the local police cars the same day that it rained like for 15 minutes. So Santiago is a great place to be in winter if you like skiing. It's actually a great place, brilliant place. No, you won't be able to do it in the street, because of cars and cops, and they'll tell you off and things getting in the way. But yeah, and also the lack of that white stuff called snow. That's probably another factor. But Santiago is in close proximity to the ski fields way up in the Andes Mountains. You can be up there like an hour and a half, I think. Depends on the traffic. Another question that some people ask is there central heating in Santiago in Chile? I've heard of it elsewhere outside of Chile. The general rule of thumb is that houses in Chile are not insulated, nor do they have central heating in Chile in general. So if you're an English teacher renting an apartment in Providencia or downtown, that's all your teacher salary can normally afford, expect to feel the cold, because many older buildings that you can afford to stay at, older buildings and houses are cold. Now, nice new houses should have some type of insulation, maybe central heating in theory, and also maybe in new apartment buildings, they have like sometimes in the roofs or under your flooring some type of heating in the newer buildings, but it is not common. I've lived in buildings and it's just like, yep, you just got to chuck an extra blanket on your bed so you don't get cold, basically. So when I lived in a poorer part of Santiago, also, the smell of kerosene heaters hung in the air. And I remember many a time having to go out into braving the cold. Okay, it's only 0 degrees, but I got a dramatic effect, You got to go out and brave the cold to fill up your plastic container at the petrol station, to get your own kerosene heater going. And in case you don't know, they smell terrible when you turn them off. And you have to leave them outside because of the toxic fumes. But some houses, they also have, what do you call them, gas heaters too. They typically see that. But houses in Santiago, they're not allowed to light fires because of it's contaminated for heating due to the already difficult contamination, smog, etc. in winter. However, they are permitted and quite common in the south of Chile, though in larger cities like Temuco, sometimes I think they're starting to put restrictions there. Not too sure about that. If you know, let me know in the comments. And there's, like in Temuco, there's I remember, I love it. I love that smell. It's like there's this continuous smoky haze blanketing the city in the colder months. And I love the smell of burning wood. Oh, so good. It blesses your house. And yep, as I mentioned before, some people in houses, they have gas heaters, which are less smelly. Actually, they don't smell compared to kerosene heaters. And you can regularly get those 15 kg cylinders of gas delivered to your house. And sometimes you hear the delivery truck going down the street like bang, bang, bang. It got this metal thing because there's a guy hitting the sides of the bottles with a steel rod or something, or the side of the truck. So another question is, how can I keep warm in Chile? I don't know, try jumping up and down lots and lots. No, seriously, try it. Anyway, I hope you found this quick guide to winter in Chile useful. Let us know if there's something else that people should know about winter in Chile or Santiago down there in the comments. And as always, have an awesome day, because winter is coming.